And so continuing into Luke, Dr. Miller, we find Matthew's changing some things. He has the women telling the disciples, by the way, unlike Mark. Luke does the same thing. And I'm not going to go and read all of it. There's a few little details. Overall, pretty similar. You get two guys who show up, and it says guys, show up with dazzling clothes and stuff. I could even see that hinting at Odysseus' transformation of his what he wore when he was transfigured. But then there's a strange road story. Like, okay, now Luke's doing something different. The road to Emmaus.
Right. So this is also, in my book, one of the major signals. It goes all the way back to the archetypal figure of Romulus. And so this is a recurring motif that you could find. There's road encounters with some of the Caesars. There's certainly the road encounter with Julius Proculus, the kind of the quintessential road encounter. I'll read you a little bit of Aristeas of Proconnesus. This is an interesting tale as well. And so this for those of you that might have the book, is I record this on page 44 and 45 of Resurrection and Reception. So the fable related to the translation of Aristeas goes as follows. Originally, an epichoric legend tale of Proconnesus and Cyzicus. The translation fable of Aristeas was made famous by Pindar and Herodotus. That's many centuries prior to the New Testament. And so this is early in the translation fable tradition. So very primitive. The legend stated that this divine man and poet had entered a fuller's shop. Fuller's shop would be the equivalent of a modern dry cleaners or something like that. They're cleaning clothes. In Proconnesus, major city in the Roman world. The Greek world. And there fell dead. Okay. So the fuller then, that's the owner of the shop, locked up his shop and went to notify the poet's relations. As the shopkeeper was out for quite some time, apparently days, with the task, a man reported to the town that as he was on the road from Artica to Cyzicus, so it's a road, and he's on a road, he had met Aristeas. Something impossible where Aristeas had to have died, as the fuller had reported. The fuller and Aristeas' friends and family, therefore, returned to the fuller's shop only to find the body of Aristeas missing. 7 years later, as the tale states, Aristeas appeared again in Proconnesus and wrote his famous Arimaspia. So I guess if you come back translated, you're able to do things like eat fish and, be touched, and also even write literary works. And then again vanished. Another signal, of course. Another 240 years later, Metapontes of Italy reported that Aristeas appeared to them as well, and instructed them to build an altar to Apollo in their land and to erect an adjacent statue of himself. So he wants to be associated with that for worship and veneration. And then again, he vanished. And so that's the last appearance that we know of Aristeas. Who knows, maybe he'll make another one.
So there's so many things there that are important to highlight. Like, he's being worshipped. It's hundreds of years later. I think it's interesting that the church has these later miracles, or what they think the Lord showed up, or appearances in some of the sacraments or stuff. Like, it may not be identical. None of it's identical, but there's like this hundreds of years later, they're still having cultic, ritualistic symbols and appearances, or they think Jesus is showing up and whatnot. And it's still going on today. That's what's interesting about the Jesus one, is that it's still going, obviously.
Sure.
And I guess John, John, you said, is carving its own path, of course, with Jesus. But is there anything in that narrative we should try to highlight about the resurrection story? Or
yeah, let's take a look at the post-resurrection appearance tradition in John. I think there's some interesting points there that we can highlight.
So John 20 is the resurrection chapter, early on Sunday morning. And it's funny, all of them have early on Sunday morning, like they're opening to the resurrection narrative. Yeah. While it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, "They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. This is that, like, I think two groups are competing or something's happening.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there's something going on. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed.
We stop there.
Yeah.
What is it that he believed exactly? It's what signaled that. And so the absence of the body, again, this is a major, this would have been kind of the semiotic trigger that would have said, oh, something happened. It's missing. It's not his presence. Its absence is sufficient.
It is kind of interesting. We pick this apart like detectives right now. We noticed that the women went. Their immediate reaction to the narrative was, go tell the disciples. They took the body and put him somewhere that they're not believing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Then this guy comes, looks in the tomb, and he somehow, then it says, the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, he saw and believed.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus hasn't even appeared yet. There's no evidence of him resurrecting yet. There's nothing. You believed why? Like you said, he went missing. That meant he became a god.
That has to be part of it, yeah. Now, there are places in the Gospels where Jesus is allegedly predicting his own resurrection after 3 days or whatever, and maybe we can include that as a rational part of this. But it's just interesting that it happens right there where one of the signals is made. It's a missing body, and all of a sudden, boom, he's believing, and I think implicit in that is this idea of worship as well. So,
I guess this is the disciple whom Jesus loved, which, Harold Attridge is writing the commentary on John, and he thinks this might symbolize the reader over against whoever, but they don't name him. It was the beloved one. But he saw and believed, and yes, I think we do need to factor in, he predicts it, but it's weird that the women who were there the whole way, the whole time, Mary especially, don't take it that way and don't believe when he goes missing. They say he took his body and laid him somewhere else. We don't know where he's at. We don't believe.
Right.
But then this unknown, unnamed figure who beats Peter to the tomb, who's the first one there, who loves Jesus the most, whom Jesus loves the most. Like,
right. He's getting the right interpretation, right? And so, he's being elevated, and
Whereas Peter doesn't get it in Mark.
Right.
John wants to make sure that, we got somebody who does. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that Jesus must rise from the dead.
I haven't read those scriptures. I've been looking for them.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Then they went home. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw two white-robed angels, one sitting at the head. Isn't it weird? None of the other guys who looked in this tomb saw this, but then Mary looks in, and now she's seeing two white-robed angels, one sitting at the head, the other at the foot of the place where Jesus' body had been lying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they have taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why?"
Stop. Okay. So it's almost like in this text, it feels like when you've read, like I have for the last 20 years, just being immersed in one translation fable after another and pouring through the ancient sources over and over. When I get to this one, it feels so spoon-fed. The other ones just assume, the body vanished and then they built a shrine and we worshipped or whatever. It's usually like 2 or 3 translation signals. This is feeling so spoon-fed. They've got celestial, I assume angels or whatever there to try and, give the presentation, and
do you see it?
Yeah.
But I don't know where they put my Lord's body.
And then this abundance of signals that usually there's only 1 or 2 or 3. In the Gospels, you get just this redundancy going on. So there's no mistaken, interpretation. Go ahead.
Yeah. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her, right?
Yeah.
"Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him. I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, "Rabboni, Rabboni."
Let's stop there. So this goes back to the Emmaus Road, and we really didn't talk about it a whole lot, but this idea that you could go incognito at any time, that was an operation of the gods. I don't know of any humans that were able to pull that off. And so, Athena, for instance, in the epics is able to go back and forth, and she's a little girl, now she's a little boy, and now she's this and that, and she's turning Odysseus into these things. But fundamentally, though, if you're turning yourself into something, that's a special power for the gods. That should be at least the default interpretation here in the Greco-Roman mind. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So don't cling to me. After she says Rabboni, which is Hebrew for teacher, don't cling. And then so this is a huge red flag in your critical assessment. The author wants to tell you which is Hebrew for teacher. Do you need to tell Jews?
Yeah, thank you.
That, like, Rabboni means this is teacher.
Stop that.
So it's like, stop thinking that this is like Jewish writing to Jews. Like, no.
No. That was not the intended, at least the primary receptive audience. At the very least, we have to assume that these texts were written for a broad range of readers, which clearly included the Hellenistic world and folks that were not steeped.
It's just hard to think that these are Jewish people who don't know what Rabboni means.
Yeah.
Don't cling to me, Jesus said. This is interesting. For I haven't yet ascended to the Father, but go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Okay,
we could stop there. The clinging, assuming that they were able to touch, again, that goes into this is not a specter or some sort of a phantom or something like that. Don't cling to me. And I think it's just setting up the reality that he's on the exit. This is an exit narrative. This is him getting ready to launch. And so he's going to take off and leave. And so, yeah.
There's just so many. So anyway, he appears. This is where he appears to his disciples. He appears to Thomas.
Yeah.
One of the 12, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, we have seen the Lord. He replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The door was locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Out of nowhere.
Okay, let's stop there. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there, and I think other scholars may freely unpack this in some different ways, and there's plenty here to do. Some scholars have written, why Thomas? Why at that time in history? Now, a lot of people are trying to read back all of this kind of historical context, and this is somehow historical footage of something that really happened. Okay. Well, this was written much later than that, and in a world that was fraught with all sorts of other concerns going on, with a Thomasine tradition that had already kind of taken root, that was not with Jesus having a physical resurrection, and that this and other scholars have written on this prior to even my investigation, and so Thomas almost becomes a literary vehicle there for the competing traditions over the nature of the raised state. Right. Now he needs physicality, not because this is, that this is some kind of a Jewish resurrection eschatological idea, but rather the physicality of his body signaled that he was not a ghost. This is a real person, and yet someone physical and palpable that could walk through walls. Okay, that's not you and me.
That's not ghost.
That's not a ghost. That's not you and me. That's a translated fit. Only the gods can do that, and demigods. In the Greco-Roman mind, you just excluded all other categories.
And that's exactly what he says when Thomas says, when Jesus says, "Put your finger here, look at my hands, put your hands into my wound in the side. Don't be faithless any longer, believe." And then it says, "My quote, my Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. That is the sign that says this is where Christians love to go to, and they're not wrong in saying, here is a deification, like proclamation, like my Lord and my God, like you're a deity, okay?
Right.
That is a huge one. And then he says, Jesus told him, "You believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." This gets into some interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, there's a quote regarding Domitian. I think it's in Suetonius even, where, I think I believe it is. This is off the top. I'm just coming off the top of my head here. But as I recall, there's an unambiguous quote of Domitian where he sends out the edict into the land. Henceforth, I'm to be referred to as my Lord and my God. And so, this is basically a straight lift. So, you know, a lot of people have tried to place it in that context to say this is literature that could be indeed, some people have even tried to date John because of that fact. And I would be included in that camp because that's such a powerful, can you imagine that edict going out into the land?
It's propaganda for sure.
Yeah, and it's so strong. I mean, the treatment of Domitian isn't terribly lengthy, but this receives special press in there that he had sent this out, and it's I think an unambiguous echo of that Jesus is trying that Jesus is being painted as almost like a counter emperor type figure. You know, that's this would have been subversive, highly subversive. Anyway, and not to mention the cultus and the veneration and all that translation implied at the end of a narrative that this would be taking place. And the result should be, the correct interpretation should be, let's build a shrine or a cult or a temple and let's start worshiping this individual. So.
And at the end of the day, I imagine this goes into all the non-canonical literature as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we really nailed down the Gospels that we have in our New Testament, but to point out, like, it doesn't end there. You can go and get lost in the other stuff that isn't in your canon. But when you see it in your canon and then you see it out there too, it just more and more solidifies this topos, this tradition of translation.
Yeah, I don't see how you get out of this. I discover it's kind of like pulling a thread and finally like, whoa, I began to see it all, but it was all held together as one single, like undeniable argument. And even if you only looked this far and didn't even bother to look at the early church fathers, the apologists and all that stuff, the case is already over with. Mm-hmm. You know, classicists find no difficulty identifying translations in ancient texts.
Right.
Like they're not staying up nights, you know, puzzled over any of this stuff. It's very clear. It's an open conversation that people have been talking about this in classics for quite a long time. And so this isn't a new thing. Once we get to the New Testament, you find double, triple, quadruple the signals there. It's unambiguous to a sin. And yet, because of the sacredness of this text, confusion remains. And so, and even most of my research for many people feels new. It's really not. I unpack this in greater detail and with more methodological sophistication probably than maybe predecessors. But D.F. Strauss already told us this, you know, over a century ago, 150 years ago. And yet he got buried and basically pushed to the margins, lost his job, and was treated as a scoundrel by his peers at that time for basically elevating awareness to these sorts of things.
Well, we need to change that, so thank you.
I hope you liked my dad, Richard Miller, in this interview. Remember to like and subscribe, and never forget, we are MythVision.
Coming in the air.